Reginald Ratso Regan was not looking at his best. His long black hair was a mess, his mascara was smeared all over his cheeks, his tongue was sticking out, his complexion looked even more ghastly than usual, and his feet were suspended several inches above the expensive cashmere carpet in the front room of his luxury Hampstead house. In spite of all this, it was Ratso's fishnet tights which caught the attention of Mr. and Mrs. Dearborn when they entered the house that night. They had seen him wearing the fishnets on many previous occasions, and, being quite broad-minded in their outlook, they liked to think that they had never found them particularly shocking. However, on all those previous occasions, Ratso had worn the tights on his legs, whereas on this occasion he was wearing them around his neck. Or, to be more precise, he was wearing the gusset end around his neck, while the two leg ends had been tied to the rather elegant crystal chandelier. At first, Mr. and Mrs. Dearborn assumed that this must be some sort of a joke. Ratso Regan, you see, was quite a joker. This, or so Mr. and Mrs. Dearborn assumed, was probably due to his being a rock music guitarist. Mr. Dearborn, who was a chartered accountant, was not much of a joker, and he considered Ratso's so-called profession to be an entirely frivolous one. When Ratso failed to respond to Mr. Dearborn's greeting, "Hello, old man, I say, what are you up to up there?" they assumed that this too was all part of the joke. It was only after he had gently pushed the legs of the pendant guitarist, and, having felt their strange coldness, and furthermore having observed the fellow's unmoving eyes and lolling head as his body swayed gently beneath the chandelier, that Mr. Dearborn began to suspect, and suspect most strongly, that all was not quite as it should be. Eventually the horrible truth was borne down upon Mr. and Mrs. Dearborn. This was not a joke. Their neighbour, Reginald Ratso Regan, was dead, stone cold dead, and swinging gently beneath the tinkling crystals of a very fine chandelier. It was then that Mrs. Dearborn began to scream, and my word, for such a skimpy-looking woman, she had a remarkably powerful scream.